Hey RCC family, my name is Sam. I'm one of the pastors here. I'm so glad you found us here online and you can watch one of these messages here online. The goal of these messages is to help you represent Jesus well right where you're at, and we're so glad you can do that here. If you'd like to get connected with a church, whether us as a staff or in different ways, you can go down to the links below. You can do that through the links to get connected. You can also go on social media and find us on social media through those links. And then finally, if you want to continue to support the ministries of RCC, you can find a way to give there. We're so excited that you're a part of this church family and that you want to continue to grow your faith and grow in your ability to represent Jesus well right where you're at. Good morning. I have to say there's something just really special and sweet and holy about a moment of baptism. I've known both of these individuals for a while now, and man, it is just a beautiful thing to watch them take these steps of faith, to be obedient to God, to watch them be lowered in the water and raised out to new life, and know that it represents something that has so deeply been happening on the inside, has happened and continues to happen on the inside of them. As I've watched people take steps of faith over the number of years here that I've been here, it's one of my favorite parts of this role. You get to just watch people do these things, take these steps, these moments of immense joy and moving forward in their faith. It's one of the privileges of the role. Along with that is not just being able to see them take these steps of faith, but you also get to know the backstories. You get to know the history, and you get to just hear people and talk to people about their stories and their life and just what goes on in the normal everyday lives of individuals. You get to hear the high highs, you get to hear the low lows, but you also get to see God working in the midst of that. Moments like this morning are especially joy-filled because you get to see those steps take place and go forward with that. But steps like that, they always emerge out of these real, honest, and often difficult stuff of life. For all of us, we have these fears, and we have these hopes, and we have these dreams, and we have these insecurities and struggles, all of this stuff swirling around in our normal everyday life. And over the years, I've gotten to chat with so many different people about exactly those kinds of things in the midst of their life. And while it's not true for everyone, most people I've had those kinds of conversations with, they end up talking about a few core things. Typically, there's a few core things that emerge out of these kinds of discussions. One of those things is people care deeply about their relationships. If they're married, they want so very much for their spouse to know that they love them, or they want so desperately to know that their spouse loves them. They have people that they care about in their life, whether it's friends or parents or children, that they want to make sure they have a right relationship with, a full relationship with. So people, we tend to care deeply about relationships. We also want to do things that matter. We want our work to matter. People are not sure if their work is worthwhile sometimes, and so they're wrestling that out, and they really want to do work that has meaning and purpose. And then finally, people that I speak with and have conversations with, they always want to feel connected. Like what they do on a daily basis is going to have an impact on not just their own life, but the lives of others. And more than that, they want to feel known. They want to know others and feel known to a degree that's beyond just surface level. Now, there are a few topics that more clearly wrestle with all three of these questions and all three of these struggles as directly as the topic of work. And you're thinking to yourself, like, work, like, what does that have to do with relationships? Work, what does that have to do with feeling connected? But actually, it's all there because our work directly impacts all three of these things, not just making sure what we do matters. In fact, our work is utterly and intricately woven into our relationships, our purpose, and how we connect with the world around us. For most people I talk to, one, two, or all three of these things typically will feel kind of out of sorts at any given time in their life. They have a relationship that feels messy or hard or uncomfortable, or they don't feel like the job that they're doing on a daily basis really matters or makes a difference, or they feel alone, isolated. And sometimes it's all three of those things, all kind of working together at the same time. Most of us would easily say that the jobs we do have a lot to do with our work, but relationships, feeling connected? Stick with me. I'm convinced that a healthy view of work, a proper and biblical understanding of what work is essential for bringing order and health to each of these areas. And that's our task for today. Our task for today, as we dive deeper into this series called Good Work, is to define that very thing. It's to define work. But before we dive deep into that this morning, first let's make sure we're building on what we started last week. Last week we began to establish this idea, this theology of work, how to think about it. And we outlined 3 different points that are foundational to our understanding of work. And the first one is this: God works. We believe, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we believe that God works because he created, he sustains. God working is integral to who he is, and literally it's why creation and all of us exist in the first place, because God works. But then because of that, the second point here is because God works, we are made to partner with God to do meaningful work. We know this in part because we're made in God's image. And as we do good work, we're showing what God is like to others. As we represent Jesus well through the work we do, we're doing what we were made to do. We're partnering with God to do the work he literally made us to do. And then for the third thing is Jesus, the third point we covered last week, Jesus' act on the cross brought to our work complementary purposes. That's what these are: the redeeming and reconciling of our relationship with God, others, and creation. That's work that we get to do because of what Jesus did on the cross. Jesus arrived here on earth, the perfect image of God in the world, and he gives us the task of being his representatives to the world, showing people as he did what God is like and drawing people back to him, reconciling and redeeming people to him through that work, partnering with Jesus in that. Now, these 3 truths begin to set the stage for us. They began last week to set the stage for us, to put things into perspective, but we still have more work, pun intended, to do in order to fill out a healthy theology of work. In order for our work to begin to have an impact on our relationships, on our purpose, and on our ability to feel connected, then we need to take an important next step. We got to define it. In short, we need to answer the question, what is work anyways? Like, what is this thing that we do? And yes, right, it's something God did, something God does and will continue to do. And yes, it's something we were made to do because we're made in the image of God. And yes, our work is the Jesus-given purpose of redeeming and reconciling. But still, what's work? Like, what is this thing called work? My wife, Meg, she's in seminary right now, and at the end of last semester, she wrote a paper on Genesis chapter 1 and its implications for human vocation. Nice, light stuff. It's great. And as it happened, it overlapped with this upcoming series really well, and her professor, after reading her paper, which she got a good grade on, just FYI, offered to chat with us about this topic in some more detail. And so we're like, okay, yeah, that'd be great, because it's great to get a professor's perspective on this topic of work. And so we ended up sitting down over Zoom. We chatted with our professor, Gary Bashirs, and it was like drinking from a fire hose in the best possible way. It's so much information on this. But one of my biggest takeaways was in the middle of this conversation that we were having with him, he told us this story of when he drove a van for a group of like 6 or so athletes, runners, who were doing a relay race from like the top of Mount Rainier or something to the coast, something crazy, like 160 miles running. And like, of course, I like that kind of stuff, so my ears perked up. And he's talking about how he's driving this van. He didn't run. He like just drove the van for them. And he's driving down, and they get to this spot near the end of the race, and there's a very popular location near the end of the race. And that location is where there's a little transition. The popular location, though, is the porta potties. Because at the end of a race, everybody's got to go, right? It's a thing. And so while he's there, waiting for the next runner to come in and the exchange to happen and the next runner to get started, he watches as this gentleman comes with a big old tanker truck to clean the porta potties. And as one does, he goes over and he begins to thank them, right? Does that whole thing. And if you don't know, porta potties, they get cleaned out by this big tanker truck. And the tanker truck has one of those hoses, right, that connects to the porta potty and like sucks all of the sewage, right, the stuff out of the porta potty, which is just this wonderful job, right? And so he goes up and he talks to the person, and like these are well-used porta potties, and so it's a big deal, it's important. So he goes up to the guy, as one does, and he thanks him, like, hey, thank you so much for taking care of these porta potties and keeping them clean. And he said that the porta potty cleaning man responded by saying something to the effect of, you know what, I'm just doing it all to the glory of God. And Gary said he was like kind of shocked by it in the moment that was his response. And he said that was one of the best theologies of work in action that he had ever witnessed. Why? Well, because work is something that's done to the glory of God. Yes, that's super important and essential. But more than that, the work he was doing really did matter, and it really did glorify God. Again, why? Because it perfectly fits within the category of what work is from a biblical perspective. In simple terms, here's the definition that Gary offered us for what biblical work is. Work is what you do to create shalom in the world. Now, how does that definition make porta potty cleaning so important? Let's dig in for a second, okay? Maybe you're like me, and you, as you hear that word shalom, grew up going to church and hearing that word, and you kind of substitute it with the word peace. Like it's a synonym in your mind. Like, okay, shalom means peace. Jesus, Prince of Peace, that whole thing. You connect those two, and it's just what you're thinking, so you connect them. This is actually one of those places where quick translations of biblical words, especially this Hebrew word of shalom, can really sell them short. Because shalom is so much more than peace or the absence of conflict. It includes those things, but it's not just those things. It's, as one author put it, the webbing together of God, humans, and all creation in justice, fulfillment, and delight. It's universal flourishing, wholeness, and delight, a rich state of affairs. In other words, shalom is the state of all things being as they should be. More simply put, it's when all relationships, our relationship with God, with each other, and with God's good creation are all well ordered. They're as they were designed to be. So, work is what you do day in and day out that moves the world, specifically the part of the world you can impact, the relationships you have influence over, toward a well-ordered state of being. Work is what you do to create shalom in the world. It's your contribution to shalom. It's your contribution to order, justice, setting things right. Now, let's be clear. Your work is not necessarily your job. Your job can sometimes be part of the good work you get to do, but your work is anything you do to create shalom in the world. This definition, it echoes all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, it says, "The earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. In other words, there was no order. There was chaos. And out of that formlessness, emptiness, and darkness, God's Spirit brought forth creation, order, what we would call goodness, shalom. If you were here last week, we talked about how creation is so incredibly intricately created and woven together. There's just this wild reality to it, right? It's the fact that water rains down, goes through the ground, and at the end of it comes out of these springs with healthy drinking water. It literally filters the waters. It was designed for that. It's the bees that pollinate a flower and not only get the resources to make honey, that is wonderful, but also makes it so that the flower itself can live and grow and be healthy. It's, as a professor friend of mine talked about, he and I were nerding out in the best possible way. He was telling me how the carbon dioxide and the oxygen of cells are like perfectly coordinating, like the cell of a human, the cell of a plant, and how they work together. It's like perfectly aligned. And it's just absurd. And think of it, there is an astonishing amount of order to this world, to a degree that if you take a step back and look at it and think about it, it should blow our brains out, right? Amazing. It's amazing. Think of that. The order that was brought out of chaos by God, the shalom, the way things were designed to exist in good and healthy relationship with one another in this world is utterly remarkable. When creation was finished, it wasn't called chaotic. It was called very good. God had done very good work. It says in Genesis 1:31, then God looked over all he had made, and he saw that it was very good. And evening passed and morning came, marking the sixth day. God had created shalom, order, peace, things as they were designed to be, as they should be. And if we are made in God's image, then work is what we do to reflect what God did. It's anything we do that partners with God to bring order out of chaos. I mean, this is why the porta potty guy was doing important work that glorifies God. It's why he can suck out sewage to the glory of God. That's amazing, right? It wasn't because he had a cross on his truck. It wasn't because he had Christian music blaring while he did his work. It was because he was bringing order and goodness to those porta potties so that the runners could use clean ones, which led to a more flourishing existence for those runners and everybody else who was spectating. It was an amazing thing. It was a gift. This doesn't just apply to sucking sewage. There's a whole lot more that goes into this. Let's step back for a moment and get the big picture for this. Each of us, we desire healthy relationships, doing things for a purpose, and connection. Each of these desires is realized when things are properly ordered, when things are as they should be, when these parts of our lives have been redeemed and reconciled, how Jesus calls them to be, when they've been made new and brought back into a right relationship with God. This is where we experience this thing called shalom. This is when we experience what God intended for us to experience, bringing order, goodness, justice, shalom to situations. That's good work. So, when you cut the grass, or maybe you're doing some yard work yesterday like I was, and you got a little overheated by the sun because you're not used to that whole thing. That can be good work because it brings order to a home. When you teach a child how to throw a ball and play catch and the rules of a game, that can be good work. When you have a hard conversation with your spouse, asking for or giving forgiveness, that's good work. When you put electricity or plumbing or heating and cooling into a home or business, you're bringing about order that contributes to human flourishing. When you build a home or build a building that's needed, You're doing good work. When you fix a car or you sell a person a vehicle that's good for them to use, that's good work. When you learn an instrument and you learn how to coordinate the notes and the music and the timing all together with other voices and other things, you're doing good work that benefits a whole group of people. When you help people find a seat on a Sunday morning, when you're trying to find a seat and it's hard, that's good work. When you hold a baby, a child, and you help them to know that they are loved and cherished, you are doing good work. When you do laundry, cook a meal, repair your home, trim a tree, weed the garden, when checking with a neighbor and listen to the struggles of a friend or a child, this is good work. Good work is anything we do to pursue shalom in the world. A further definition of shalom is this: it's the way things ought to be, the full flourishing of human life in all aspects, as God intended it to be. Shalom denotes a right relationship with God, with others, and with God's good creation. Okay, so that's what shalom is. And that's what good work is. And if we get a picture of it all the way back to creation and the creation account, then what does the rest of the Bible have to say about it? How does the Bible describe this kind of good work? There's a multitude of places that you can go to look for these things, but one of my favorite places to think about and to look at this idea of work is found in Romans chapter 12. And the first couple verses of Romans chapter 12 we quote all the time. It's one of those sets of verses that are just so powerful because it talks about giving yourself as a living sacrifice and being renewed by the transforming of your mind, or being transformed by the renewing of your mind, rather. And those are amazing verses, but right after that, man, it just goes deep into this stuff. It continues. It says in Romans 12, starting in verse 3, it says, "Because of the privilege and authority God has given me, I give each of you this warning. Don't think you are better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves, measuring yourselves by the faith God has given us. Just as our bodies have many parts, and each part has a special function, so it is with Christ's body. We are many parts of one body, and we all belong to each other. In His grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. So if God has given you the ability to prophesy, speak out with as much faith as God has given you. If your gift is serving others, serve them well. If you are a teacher, teach well. If your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. If it is giving, give generously. If God has given you leadership ability, take the responsibility seriously. And if you have the gift of showing kindness to others, do it gladly." In God's view, good work happens when each of us play our part. When we recognize the gift that God has given us, and then we put that gift into practice. Even the way God gives out gifts and skills shows that God loves a well-ordered world, right? He gives each person this different sets of gifts, and when we put them all together, somehow it works. It's incredible when we're all living up to how God called us to be. And He reminds us that we need each other, right? We're not to think that we're better or more important than we really are. That's maybe my favorite line, right? Don't think you're better than you really are. What a great line in Scripture. But it's so good for us, right? Like each part plays an important role, and we should honor each and every part. But what I think is lovely is Paul's just getting warmed up. He continues on, starting in verse 9. He says, "Don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically." Good work is diligent work. It's not lazy. It's also connected to genuine love and doing what is right and good. Sounds a lot like pointing to shalom, doesn't it? And working toward shalom. Now, Paul has one more section here that he goes on with. Starts in verse number 12. It says, "Rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble and keep on praying. When God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Don't curse them. Pray that God will bless them. Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. There's something really remarkable in these verses. God is teaching us through Paul's writing to care for and bless and pray for and mourn with and be happy with and enjoy the company of people, of specifically ordinary people. Good work always connects with people. It's relational. Not only are we called to do good work by helping to bring order to the world we live in, we're called to do good work by bringing peace and order and goodness to the relationships we have. Now, there's so much here. Hopefully, we're beginning to get a sense of how this definition of work changes the way that we view the way God calls us to do good work in the world. But with all this in mind, maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, okay, that all sounds really nice, Sam. I get it. Good work. There's all kinds of good things that we can do. I understand. Yeah, I know I'm supposed to do that kind of stuff. Great, wonderful, all that kind of stuff. But there's some other things at play here, and I'm a little concerned. Maybe you're thinking that as you're here this morning. And I think there's two things that really stand out as like asterisks to this topic of work and good work. And the first thing I think is this, that if there is such a thing as good work, then it follows that there must be the opposite, right? The opposite of good work. And instead of calling it bad work, I think a better term for us this morning is anti-work. Anti-work. And it's not rest. We're not talking about rest here. We're talking about anti-work. Effort put towards the opposite of shalom. And there is a good deal of anti-work in this world. I mean, if you watch the news, you wake up to it every day. Today was no different. This is the effort that people put into things that do the opposite of producing shalom. Some of you may feel like you have a job that does exactly this, right? This is the kind of effort that goes into deceitful, harmful, manipulative, or damaging results. This could happen anywhere we do work, but it's often particularly difficult when it's connected to the very thing you do to bring home a living and to care for your family, which is a good thing to do. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, what if that's my job? What if I go to work and I have to do these things that I feel uncomfortable about, but I need to do it because I need to bring home a living for my family? What do you do if that's the case? Let me say this to start. No job is perfect. I mean, every job is filled with humans, and we're so far from perfect, so it will never be everything you want it to be, ever. But if that's you, if you find yourself in that place where you feel like the job you feel like you have to do to earn a living is contributing more to anti-work than to good work that God has called us to do, here are some things to consider for yourself. First, can you be part of the solution? Can you bring order and goodness and light into that disordered place? Maybe it's a place that feels really dark, but your presence there is that one bit of light that's good. Can you do that? And if the answer is, I've tried, it is just so awful and difficult and not good, then the next question is this: can you work toward getting a role or a job that doesn't require you to do the kinds of anti-work or anti-shalom things that you've been finding yourself having to do? What would it look like to pursue a different role? Now, this is hard stuff. This is difficult. This is often excruciating kinds of things. There's a lot more here that we don't have time for today. But if you need help processing this, don't be afraid to reach out to one of the pastors on staff and just ask this question. And if you need someone to process with, that's a good thing to do. What does it look like to find yourself in a place where you're doing good work, however imperfectly? And there's that other note. A last note as we talk about good work that you might be thinking, okay, I know, work, all the good stuff, but what about that whole rest thing? Can we talk more about that? Anybody want to talk more about that one? Couple people? Okay, I got you. At the end of the work of creation, God did something. And it says this in Genesis 2, 1-3. It says, "So the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. On the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation. So he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from his work of creation." A few points here. Yes, we are made to work. Literally, our part of our purpose of who we are, our identity. Out of our identity comes this need to do good work. But we were also made to rest, both together. Rest is different than work. It's literally, as defined, doing something different. It's different than the work that we do during the week. Rest and Sabbath, which is what it's called, that Sabbath day, the seventh day, are for delighting in God and delighting in the results of work. God's work and the work we partner with God in doing. Rest and Sabbath delight are a gift, but they're not our sole purpose. We're not made to Sabbath. We're made to work, and we're given the gift of delighting then in the work that God has done and also in the work that we've gotten to do with God. And how we rest, it matters, and so does how we do work. The right kind of work paired with healthy, God-honoring rest will lead to a healthier, fuller, shalom-filled kind of life for us and the people that you get to influence. But that's another topic for another day that we're going to get to in a couple weeks. We're going to dive deeper into that in a couple weeks. Today, as we finish up here, we have covered so much. And I want us to walk away with a few important notes. First is this. As Christians, we're not called to just sit around and wait for Jesus to return. There's good work for us to do right now. Yes, that day will be glorious. Yes, that day when we get to be in heaven with him will be amazing. But right now, God has a purpose for us, for each and every one of us, and it's good work. That's a part of it. Second thing, how we understand what work is impacts so much of our relationship with it. Our work is not necessarily our job. We can do good work at our job, but the good work God has called us to fills so much more of our life. And that work that we do, that good work of creating shalom in the world, it directly impacts our relationships, our purpose, our connection with God and with other people and with God's good creation. You are called to do good work. You are called to work things towards shalom. That's the definition, right? Work is what you do to create shalom in the world. It's one of the key ways that we represent Jesus well. And there are an infinite number of ways that we can do this. Whether it's by sucking up that thing at a porta potty, which is beautiful and good, cleaning porta potties, or it's simply caring for your neighbor, or looking out for your family, or doing the good work of showing up on a Sunday morning and serving and caring for people. There are so many ways that God has called us to do good work and point to Jesus with it, reconciling and redeeming. So the question is, will you join in? Will you do good work? Will you think about the work that God has called you to? Will you join into doing it? Would you pray with me? Dear God, we are just so grateful for the fact that you have called us to have meaning and purpose in the work that we do. That it is more than a job, that it is literally what you've given us and called us to do with our lives. That you've ordered it so well that there's both work and rest. And God, we just pray this morning that as we think about this kind of work that we get to do, that we would be aware of and be able to identify the anti-work that's in our life, the kinds of things that lead toward disorder and destruction and leading people away from you. And that we would be able to spend the time doing the good work and replacing that anti-work with good work to lead people and guide people back towards you. God, help us to be part of bringing shalom, goodness, justice, peace, reconciling people to you into this world. We pray this in Jesus' name.